real problem, real big problem with Dana White calling Khabib the GOAT. We all know Khabib just announced his retirement at 29-0, but hey, in Jon Jones' eyes, he is still the GOAT. Now, Jon Jones isn't happy with Dana White after calling Khabib the GOAT after his UFC 254. Now, Jon Jones has an issue with Dana White calling Khabib the GOAT. On Saturday, we know Khabib retired from MMA with a perfect 29-0 record after making quick work of Justin at UFC 254. As you can see right there, Khabib won via tap out because he put a triangle chokehold on Justin. That was just like, how in the fuck did he do that, and when did he put it on? Just was simply amazing. Shout out to Khabib. You're definitely one of the greatest. Now, and I quote, he tweeted, "I promised my mother this is going to be my last fight. I only wanted one thing from the UFC. I want to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world." Now, he announced his retirement after saying that. Some have said that this is guaranteed to be his stamp as being the GOAT because of the way he retired. His record, who is it reminiscent to? Yeah, Floyd Mayweather in professional boxing. Undefeated, nobody kicked his ass. He leaves out on top of the mountain that he is on. Now, let's get to the point at hand. Now, UFC's president Dana White went on to call Khabib the GOAT for easily beating Justin while dealing with a serious foot injury. So, UFC president Dana White says Khabib is one of the toughest human beings on the planet and is the GOAT after winning his last fight. Yeah, he said that, and if you want to watch that video in its entirety, click on the link in the description. So, apparently he was in the hospital. He broke his foot 3 weeks ago, so he has 2 broken toes and a bone in his foot that's broken or something like that. That's what his corner was telling me. Never told anybody walking around. I mean, he is one of the toughest human beings on the planet. He is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and you seriously have to start putting him up there at GOAT status with whoever else you think is the GOAT. And when you hear back in the UFC, there's one name that comes to mind. Jon Jones, who many consider the GOAT of all time despite his controversial past, went to Twitter and took an issue with White declaring Khabib the GOAT. And I quote, he tweeted these out: "I'm just going to ask for the heavyweight championship belt and see if they give it to me, since we can just ask for things now." And he didn't stop there. He went on a rant saying that the same company who accused him of possible steroids, vindicated me from it. If I just started fighting for the titles 4 fights ago, I look like an absolute beast too. But okay, I guess you're only worth your last performance in this game. So no cry, no pain replied to Jon Jones, saying, "Huge fan, Jones, like seriously." But I think the reason they're giving GOAT status is his level of dominance over literally everyone he has faced, plus his clean record number and clean background. I think that's why a lot are leaning that way. So Jones said, "When I signed with UFC, I was one of the youngest fighters on the roster, youngest champion in the history of the sport, and have only had 3 competitive fights." And Jones also tweeted, "I mean, if I get outranked by a man with only 3 title defenses, I don't really know what to think anymore." So Greg Stevens tweeted out, "Do you really think you're the greatest ever?" So Jon Jones replied, "Yet people want me to stay quiet and let him have his moment while I just sit back and watch my hard work get moved down the rankings. It's not fair to my family or the team of people who have sacrificed to get me this far." So Mike Garcia replied to Jon Jones, "Jon, you're 21-0 in the UFC. He's only 13-0. You face stiffer competition. He may be the greatest lightweight, but definitely not the greatest overall." Jones wasn't done there. He said, "Over 50% of my career have been title fights. LeBron James is allowed to win the game by 1 point, but not Jon Jones. Man, I have really spoiled you guys." So Michael Carr said, "The problem is Khabib destroys people and finishes them. John Jones went on to say, if we're having a popularity contest, I'd gladly take my L. This shit has nothing to do with my fame or being a good person. I've given my whole adult life to this game. I owe it to myself to speak up. Now, everybody has their own opinion when it comes to this topic, but who do you guys think is really the GOAT? Now, let's look at some numbers here and look at some names, or listen. When the greatest of all time comes to mind in the UFC, you think of people like George St. Pierre, Conor McGregor. There's a lot. You have Chuck Liddell, one of the founders, well, not founders, one of the originators of UFC, the Iceman. He could be considered the GOAT. Rampage Jackson, Randy Couture, Matt Hughes, just to throw some names out there. Let's talk about the future. Israel, Francis, Max Holloway. And you can't forget people like Nick Diaz, clearly Tyron Woodley. All these people have done a lot for the business. Tito Ortiz, Brock Lesnar. Let's think of what he's done for this company. And we can't forget, in my opinion, I think this is someone that clearly should be considered one of the GOATs, because I think she made female UFC fighting what it is today, and that is Ronda Rousey. All because of that loss that she took, people looked at her differently. So, I look at what Ronda Rousey has done, clearly because of like I said, being the OG before all of this is where it's at now. These people were kicking ass. Before all the other Amanda Nunes and all of those females, there were Ronda Rousey. Like I said, you can't just, it's a big debate, because like I said, when you think of GOAT, when we think of GOAT in sports, we think of like Michael Jordan, who clearly had more rings than anybody on the current, dominated like no other, had more rings than anybody to this day, and dominated like nobody that we ever saw in the game. So if you think of John Jones in that manner, and you think of Khabib in that manner, then it is so close. But can you compare different weight classes? Because we're talking about fighting. So this conversation can go on forever. In my personal opinion, I think John Jones is probably the greatest fighter, because nobody really kicked his ass in his weight division. But if you want to go to the greatest of all time, that's so debatable. But right now, this current, I'll say John Jones in a close second would probably be Khabib. As far as putting it higher on the map, the UFC, you got to get at the Conor McGregor. But this, like I said, can go so many ways, and we still have a little bit more time for this conversation. But what do you guys think between the two? Is John Jones more of a GOAT than Khabib? Like this video, leave your comments and subscribe.